Hey guys, this is Allison from Allykatkreations. How are you? I'm hanging in. Today I'm going to read The Key of Destiny, and we're going to tackle number 14. Before I do, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. Also, if you would like to support my work, if you've gotten anything from it, a connect the dot, a light bulb moment, an epiphany, any of the above, please consider supporting me. The days are getting numbered and I'm trying not to freak the fuck out as I try to learn how to air dry my long locks here and not look like Einstein. Fun times. So chapter 14, the mental foundation. Quote, every week, that is every 14,000 years, the soul bathes itself and reposes in the Jubilee dream of forgetfulness. The Kabbalah unveiled, Mathers. Just as we found number 4 to be the foundation stone or the physical basis upon which nature is built, so we may look upon number 14 as being the foundation stone in the mental world or the material foundation upon which we must build the higher mental conceptions of truth. I'm going to put a pause right there. And if anybody has been following the succession of all the books that I've been reading, Spirit is syncing all of this together because we're tackling the truth in the Kabbalion. The new essay booklet I got yesterday that I did a recording on, The Secret Doctrine. I mean, it goes on and on and on, even a WASP. What is this trying to portray to people? That there is a truth that we're not aware of or has been hidden from us. See how this is all sinking in? It's incredible, and I don't do this purposely. As we have said elsewhere, after having laid the foundation stone with its fourfold base upon which the personality must be sacrificed, yet which is necessary to a true foundation, let us lay one more stone upon the pyramid of truth which we are erecting in our lives. Since the pyramid is to be our tower of truth in the 3 worlds, until we have the foundation laid in each of the worlds, our tower cannot reach into the heavens. This stone we call our mental foundation stone. The Hermetic axiom, as above, so below. As below, so above, applies in all realms. Just as the creation of the world, the rocks must first solidify and take form, ere the work of creation can proceed. So in the mental world, our conceptions of truth must solidify and take form, ere our mental world can be founded upon a rock, ere we can truly enter upon the path of illumination. This mental foundation, the soul must lay for itself first through the mental analysis, and then through the synthesis of the experiences gained in the complete cycle of number 10. For number 14 is all the number 4 symbolizes with the power of number 10 added. We must also consider the form, the digital valuation of 1 + 4 = 5, or humanity 5, the thinking beyond our manas, the man who has recognized in himself the one life and consciously laid his foundation stone 4, in the mental world, and upon it begun the erection of his temple of the living Christ. Number 14 is called the number of the mental foundation because it is only when the mind of man has laid a firm foundation and knows on what to build up his mental structure that he can become a balanced thought producer. Without such a foundation, his thoughts are but fleeting and are not spiritually vital. Mere waves of thought force, often not his own, which are passing through his mind, thought forces of the community in which he dwells. But a balanced mind, while still receiving the thought waves of the community, has gained the ability to weigh them and reject those which do not appeal to him or which do not harmonize with the ideals he has set for himself. He can also transmute the error he finds in the community thought and send it forth again in corrected and helpful thought waves. Pause. We, on a massive scale, need to start doing this. Sending out what really needs to be put out there so that people can catch on the waves. And correct the propaganda bullshit that's out there. In short, one who has laid for himself this mental foundation in a large measure is master of his thoughts, hence is a leader and of the thoughts of others. One who has thus balanced his own mind becomes to the community a rock or jetty against which the waves of adverse, trifling, and impractical thoughts may toss yet never override, a breakwater which turns the tides of thought into wise and helpful channels. Number 14, therefore, represents the man who has balanced his mind or put his mental house in order and who has laid four square the cubic stone whose four corners or perception, promptness, perseverance, and perfection as described by us elsewhere thus. He who recognizes his powers to perceive spiritually is approaching the last corner. He is carving the corner of perception. He has perception in its wider sense. He is pumped and eager because he perceives something true to be obtained. He is like a miner who, after years of toil and hardship, at last sees traces of gold. How pumped are his actions? How invaluable and persistent are his efforts? If all his hardships are endured for the possible possession of physical gold, how much more eager should be our efforts and perseverance once we truly perceive the possibility of obtaining spiritual gold? That's more important than riches and physical. When we approach the illumination of the mind, when we begin to perceive spirituality with the third eye, no matter what we fix our attention upon, we will see it with spiritual perception. We will throw and know how to find the answer to every question. This eye, however, does not open all at once, but follows the law of growth. Sometimes there is a flash of spiritual perception which overwhelms the novice, but which is immediately followed by darkness, more profound than before. This is not the final opening of the eye, but it should convince us that its continuous function is possible. The true opening of the third eye is a great step upon the path, yet it is not the end, for we still have our spiritual foundation stone to carve and lay. It is but the completion of the mental foundation stone that accum of perfection. What these three corners are carved and erected, the discipline will be surprised to find that the fourth corner has appeared carved itself in the night while he slept, or during the long days when he was so busy with the other 3 P's. This 4th corner P is perfection, and he would wonder at its attainment, even as the prince did when he found his wonderful palace erected in a night by the magician. For everyone has a magician to work for him once he learns how to command him. We call this magician the will, which never fails to work its wonders for all who make it their servant. But like Aladdin, we must polish up the lamp of truth, keep it bright and shining. Whenever we call upon our magician, we must rub the lamp, for true, pure, bright, shining, and uncovered is the lamp, or receptacle for the divine light of illumination. And the magician will only obey one who knows how to keep his lamp polished, trimmed, and burning. It is only when he cultivates the will and recognize it as a wonder-working magician, giving us to use and not to shut up in a dungeon, that we can gain even that so much desired gift of earthly prosperity. To say nothing of spiritual prosperity, in number 14, we must awaken this magician for his sleep and set him to work. Moreover, our mental foundation stone must be a perfect cube. To make it a cube, we must determine to see all sides of every question presented to us. Many persons develop the mind in a groove, seeing but one side. When this is done, instead of the will being a magician, it is but a slave. Instead of using our magician to build us a wonderful castle, we find that because the foundation is not square and true, we must force him to build on one side only. Hence, no matter how powerful we may be, all that he can erect for us is a high stone wall, which shuts us away from our fellow men and restricts and narrows our beliefs. Here, carefully sheltered behind this great wall of separation, we live in a world of our own conception, where we cease growing spiritually because we have cut off our sympathetic communication with the outside world. And anyone who dares to climb up and look over our wall, we throw stones at or ridicule and drive away. Sounds like the paradigm we are all living in right now. Here also, phantoms of the mind, or distorted reflections and conceptions of facts and ideas, instead of being checked up and corrected by contact with other minds, are built up into delusions, which by repeated contemplation became so powerful as to blind us to, and in our mental life, take the place of realities. Such phantoms are often difficult to disintegrate and displace, even by positive proof of physical facts. We speak of such persons as having a peculiar, I hate that word, bias of mind, which prevents them from clear thinking. Usually such delusions are confined to a single idea or a line of thought, but when they are systematized, the logical deductions derived from them affect all other lines of thought and action. Such persons called paranoiacs. That's a new one for me. One of the most dangerous types of insanity, for they are beyond the reach of reason, logic, and fact. Hence, in the stage represented by number 14, we must strive always for mental soundness and squareness. To our 4 square mental foundation, we must all add the 10 of perfection. This, however, must realize to be but a step, although a perfect step. Do not think, as so many do, that a mental foundation stone 4 square and perfect is all that is needed. For on this stone we must build a tower that shall penetrate the clouds of earth, with many windows looking in all directions, each one clear as crystal, so that from the rising of the sun even to its going down, it shall light up the windows and fill our tower with spiritual light. Number 14 is called the number of delusions. But when we realize that it is the foundation of our thoughts, we know there is no delusion. That is not the effect of wrong thinking. Also, that only the uncontrolled reaction can delude us. Only the mind can turn our good magician who waits our direction to build us a palace of pure gold and crystal into a black magician who shall forever invoke for us the powers and principalities of evil and rule us through mental delusion. Let us then cultivate the will and furnish it a square foundation, and there will be nothing to fear. The number 14 must also be considered as 7 plus 7 equals 14. Since we have seen that 7 is the Sabbath day of the rest in which the soul finds refreshment, so in 14 we find another Sabbath day, but not the same as in number 7, for here it is the mind that rests. We have back of us the memory of the struggles and triumphs during our journey from 1 to 10. We look like the Sabbath day of number 7 and remember that the sweet converse of our spiritual guide and the refreshment of our weary limbs. We have the sure personal knowledge that there is a rest and fulfillment because we have already experienced it once. Therefore, we can now trustingly lay aside our mental worries, all doubts and perplexities, knowing that we have reached the Sabbath of mental rest, where we shall find refreshment and strength to go climbing to the greater heights. Indeed, so long as the rational mind struggles or argues, the divine mind cannot illume or impress it. Only as we quiet the mind and rest can we hear the still small voice of higher self. As we have seen in number 7, there are 7 portals on this journey, and we may call number 14 the second portal. At each portal, we must pause, study the path we have traversed, rest, and gain strength to go on. Here we must make sure we have obtained the key that will unlock for us the portal. For only after we have mounted all the 49 steps can we knock at the door of the 7th portal. Each portal reached is evidence that we have gained perfection in that one particular. As we read the voice of the silence, each portal has a golden key that openeth its gate. And for the second portal, we need the key of harmony in word and act, the key that counterbalances the cause and effect and leaves no room for karmic action. Hence, the key of harmony can be obtained only by a balanced mind obedient to the will. Well then, what are we all waiting for? Also, since number 7 completes the first octave of creation, or is a number in which the divine creative fire or Christ's force is nature, has found its first perfect adjustment. So in number 14, man must take hold of himself and all his wonderful powers as a creator and being under the control of his will, this same Christ power or creative fire. He must learn through experience, firstly, that he is not a mere puppet through whom this mighty creative force surges, creating in him and through him with no volition of his own, even as it manifests in nature to perfect a flower or with equal ease a noxious weed. In man, it cannot work thus because of his free will to determine whether it shall be a flower or a weed that he creates. If his will is not used to guide, it will always be impediment. He knocks at the gate of the second portal, the 14th step. He must be a worker with the divine, a conscious agent for the use of manipulation of the divine force. He must know what it is and how to use it, subject to his awakened and spiritualized will. He must realize that it is always creative and that he is responsible for the children, creations of his thoughts, as well as the offspring of his deliberate determination to create and bring forth in perfect accord with his will, physical bodies or temples in which divine souls may incarnate. This he can accomplish only when his mental foundation is laid true and four square. Only thus can he learn how to think and how to become a conscious creator. For he has taken hold of thought force as the vehicle of creative fire to make it obey his will. 'Tis here we approach this gate, we hear the master's voice speaking in no uncertain tones, saying, have mastery over thy thoughts, O striver for perfection, if thou wouldest cross its threshold safely. The ancient Greeks associated the number 14 with reincarnation, their doctrine being that as the soul about to be reborn on earth drank of the waters of Lith, ere it took up another pilgrimage, so in number 14 we again take on humanity, or number 5, the number of man, but now reborn or made up of 10 plus 4 equal 14 equal 1 plus 4 equal 5. Hence they assert that at 14 the struggle with matter must recommence, but they fail to lay stress upon the fact that the soul at every rebirth enters earth life with all the wisdom gained during his excarnate life from contemplating the experiences and lessons of his past earth life, stored up in the higher body or power gain, and then built into his newborn body and brain as character and inherent faculties. Hence in 14 he begins where the old life left off, rather takes another step in experience. There is therefore a greater reason for associating reincarnation with number 11, as we have done then with number 14. In Sifra Yitzraya, the 14th path of wisdom is called the path of illuminating intelligence, thus collaborating what we have said about its beginning, the number of mental foundation. Also the moon, the planet of inspiration, waxes and wanes in periods of 14 days each. Number 14 rules the boundary of the great circle or ring, pass not, and also sometimes called the rope of the angels. Anagrammatically and Kabbalistically, 14 is expressed as 31415. For whichever way the figures are counted, they equal 14. But 31415 is the inconsumable number which denotes the ratio of the circumference of a circle to its diameter. And since the sum of its digits is 14, it makes 14 a fitting symbol of the ring pass not. The Egyptians taught that after Set had slain Osiris, he cut the body into 14 pieces. Osiris as the sun god, and also in one aspect as the ruler of neither regions, symbolized man as the sun initiate. As he reaches this point, every man who is following the inner mystical life may he said to be slain and cut into 14 parts, for he has slain or sacrificed the personality 5, which is the sum of the divine one, manifesting on earth 4, the 5 being composed of 14 or 1 plus 4. But we are also told that Isis, the true priestess of the inner mysteries, gathered the 14 pieces and put them together and made Osiris a god. Someday when Isis came as bride as well as mother, man will find that all things on all planes that he cuts from himself at this 14th step will give back to him to be purified. Isis as bride and mother is another mystery symbolizing the great mother principle in nature and man, which must be espoused by the sun initiate. In its mother aspect, it gives man his spiritual birth, and later when man has made the higher correlation with it, it becomes its bride, the power through which he is able to put together, synthesize, and bring forth as a god. Each initiate is an Osiris or Christian man, insofar as he is capable of expressing the divine Osiris or Christ principle. Apollonius calls 14 the 5th hour of initiation, the waters above the heavens. Here the disciple must become acquainted with the great astral currents, for in the astral world the currents are terrific. And just as a mariner must learn to steer a ship so as to take advantage of the currents of the wind and water, so the disciple ventures consciously into the astral regions. He must study and know just how and where and why these terrific currents of astral force manifest, and must utilize them, or we might say command them. Long before this step is reached, the student must enter these regions, but should never do alone or unprepared. When he requests it, he is always guided and taught in the hand of a wise, through often invisible master, steers him in safety through the currents, just as we sail the ocean unthinkingly, depending on the knowledge of the captain to guide us safely through the currents of the wind and sea. But during this hour, the disciple must learn to steer his own bark through the currents of this astral sea, and not only consciously enter it alone and unprotected, saved by his soul's armor, but master and navigate its currents as well as control its inhabitants. In the earlier steps of the second hour, he must learn to control the earth forces, even the wind and the sea. Of the true Son initiated as Jesus, it can be said, what manner of man is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him? But in the fifth hour, he becomes Superman, and the waters and winds in the astral above the firmament must also obey him. Superman? There's a lot of good tidbits there, guys. A lot. The 14th letter, none. Quote, the day has been prepared for the elect as a day of covenant, and for sinners as a day of inquisition. In that day shall be distributed for food 2 monsters, a female monster whose name is Leviathan, dwelling in the depths of the sea, above the springs of waters, and a male monster whose name is Behemoth, which possesses moving on his breast, the invisible wilderness. Book of Enoch. He produced none, predominant in small crowned it, combined and formed with it Scorpio in the universe, Heshvan in the year, and the intestines of man, Sifra Yitzraya. The 14th letter of the Hebrew alphabet is Nun. It is one of the simple letters and corresponds to the zodiacal sign Scorpio. Its meaning is given as a fish or something springing from the primordial waters, something which has its existence not only from the very beginning of manifestation of this planet, or the waters of the great deep were broken up, but also something that swims or exists in the mother element, water, which underlies the manifestation of all life, or we might say something which dwells in very substance from which all life on this planet must spring. From the earliest ages, a fish has been associated with the deep hidden mystery of the manifestation of the divine and its action in the world of matter. As we have frequently pointed out, any word or idea which endures for ages and is taken up and expressed in many different forms of religious thought does so because it expresses some deep truth. So it is with this symbol of the fish, for its fundamental symbology is the esoteric or hidden doctrine common to all religions. Among the Hindus, and the first avatar of Vishnu was represented as half fish and half man, just as were the Chaldean Omnans, the Phoenician and Philistine Dagon, the Greek Phobos, and the Hindu Durga. The ancient Mexicans and Peruvians also had semi-fish gods, and in the Hebrew Talmud, the Messiah is frequently referred to as Dag, the fish. While common symbol for the followers of Jesus during the early centuries was likewise a fish. There's also certain versions of the deluge in which the ark is represented as being drawn through the waters by a huge fish. The Hawaiians believe in a sacred shark which dwells in the waters surrounding their islands, and they have many legends of great leaders or gods having been cast overboard and guided safely to land through the swift and treacherous currents of their tempestuous channels and seas by either riding on the back of the shark or holding on to its tail. Orpheus is also said to have been cast overboard from a ship by his superstitious sailors and had to have been saved by a huge dolphin. All these myths are very similar to that of Jonah, and with precisely the same esoteric meaning, namely that we have swallowed, retired from our outer life for the 3 periods, the 3 days in the belly of the fish, corresponding to the 3 days in the tomb of the great initiation into esoteric wisdom before he was prepared to preach to the people of Nineveh. Jesus told his disciples when they asked him for a sign that there would be no sign given save that of the prophet Jonah, the sign of the fish, the inner esoteric wisdom, which alone should assure them of the truth of his teachings and protect them when cast into the turbulent sea of humanity. The Christ chose his disciples from among fishermen, even as he does today, from among those who are fishing in the great sea for the esoteric wisdom. And to them he still speaks and assures them that they shall become fishers of men. All this apparent worship of the fish is usually looked upon by mythologists as a sign of a primitive and superstitious nature, but in reality it reveals the fact that at least the seers in the true priesthood of those early nations understood the deep spiritual import of the universal symbol, for in each case the various deities represented by the great fish were the avatars to the various races, also to the hierophants who presided over the initiations of mortals into the inner and sacred degrees of the wisdom religion. The fish representing the understanding and realization of the inner mystery of the power which ever draws the ark of man's life safely through the raging waters of the sea of humanity. And it is this same fundamental idea that the Hawaiians, although in many cases ignorantly, which causes them to revere the king of sharks as the protector of their islands and of their fast disappearing religion. This is also the meaning of the allegory of Jesus feeding the multitude with 5 loaves of bread and the 2 small fishes, which although continually feeding the multitude were never consumed. The 5 loaves symbolizes the erotic doctrine, which can be grasped through the 5 outer senses, while the 2 fishes refer to the mysteries of the esoteric doctrine, which can only be grasped by man's 2 inner senses. Only the mystery of the 2, male and female, united in one flesh through that mysterious force of attraction called love, one aspect which manifests through the attraction of sex. When the power of love rises from the level of the outer conceptions of the sea of humanity and ascends into heaven, it truly becomes the initiator of the hierophant of the unfolding principle. In Psalms, we find the same doctrine. Thou breakest the heads of Leviathan in pieces and gavest him to be meat to the people inhabiting the wilderness. This may well be a prophecy of the age upon which we now just entering, when the great fish of esoteric teaching pertaining to the lifting up of a godlike power to create will be given to the people to eat in the same mystical sense that we are told to eat the body of Christ. This is the great task confronting every soul who seeks initiation into the mysteries, is indicated by the question asked Job at his initiation, namely, could be drawn up out of the depths of his inner nature, this mighty Leviathan, and feed on its flesh. The Leviathan is a famous monster which symbolizes the deep unexpressed power of attraction between the sexes. It is a monster, as Enoch tells us, which dwells in the depths of the sea. It is the most all-compelling force dwelling in the sea of humanity. It also dwells above the springs of water, that which, like the springs of water, nourishes and replenishes the great sea of humanity. It is a monster in that it is continually devours, in the form of lust, the purity and beauty of man's creations. Its slimy tail is over the land, so that it has even been questioned by the seeker after esoteric wisdom, if it be possible to find the path of wisdom until the monster has been killed past resurrection. Yet we find that Job, in his initiation, is asked by the Lord, or the great initiator, "Canst thou draw out Leviathan with a hook, or his tongue with a cord, which thou lettest down?" Anyone who reads carefully the entire 41st chapter of Job will see that the back of this symbolic language, the meaning here given, is plainly indicated. To quote a few points, "Will he speak with soft words unto thee? Will he make a covenant with thee? Wilt thou take him for a servant forever? Wilt thou play with him as with a bird? Or wilt that thou bind him for thy maidens? Shall not one be cast down even at the sight of him? None is so fierce that dare stir him up." And Job answers, "I will not conceal his parts, nor his powers, nor his comely proportion. Who can come to him with his double girdle? His eyes are like the eyelids of the morning. Out of his mouth go burning lamps, and sparks of fire leap out. His breath kindleth coals, and flame goeth out of his mouth. Sorrow is turned into joy before him. When he raiseth up himself, the mighty are afraid by reason of breaking. They purify themselves. He esteemed iron as straw, and brass as rotten wood. The arrow cannot make him flee. He laugheth at the shaking of a spear. He maketh a path to shine after him. Upon earth there is not his like. He beholdeth all high things. He is a king over all the children of pride. For all this, we must gather that this greatest of all forces, which is a monster if permitted to rule in the depths of our natures, is nevertheless not to be killed, but to be tamed, unless and transformed into the crowning blessing of life given us by the Creator, as not as a danger to fly from or a monster to be ruthlessly killed, but something necessary for the subsistence of our spiritual life. As we have seen in the heading of this chapter, this overpowering dual force, in the day that we conquer it and fearlessly face its lower aspect or draw it out of the sea by a hook and place it in the waters above the firmament, will be given us for food. That is, all humanity will eat of it in the same inner sense in which we are told to eat of the flesh of Christ. Assimilate its power, be nourished by its virtues, and partake of its blessings. Joshua, to whom Moses handed over the reins of government after the lawgiver, the exoteric teacher, had led them out of Egypt, was called the son of none, an esoteric teacher. True, esoteric teachers must begin by teaching how to lift up the eagle from their lair of the scorpion, that it may nest on high. As long as the hammer of Scorpio displays only the serpent by the way, the adder in the path, we are struggling in the sea. Many would be captains or teachers while riding in the ship of personality on this sea. When the winds and waves threatened to swamp the boat, cast Jonah overboard, declared the whole question taboo, and one who, like Jonah, would preach the higher esoteric doctrine is to them but a creator of storms, hence should be thrown overboard. But if Jonah be truly sent by the Lord of the great fish, will receive and preserve him. Just as the sea or mare is called the Great Mother, and the fish is the product of the sea. So hieroglyphically, the letter Nun by some interpreters is called the offspring and is associated with production. It is also called the sign of individual and corporeal existence. In this sense, it is easy to see its association with the zodiacal sign Scorpio, for in that sign we have the great problem of sex set before us. First, in its aspect of the scorpion, which brings death, yet which in its senseless anger turns on itself and stings itself to death, symbolizing the result of uncontrolled sexual debasement. Secondly, in its symbol as the eagle, the lesson of sex learned or lifted up, it shows through the experience thus gained, there comes the ability to fulfill the prophecy, ye have seen how I bear you on eagle's wings and brought you unto myself. But they that wait on the Lord law should renew their strength. They shall mount up with the wings of eagles. Also, one of the questions asked of Job is at his initiation was, doth the eagle mount up at the command and make her nest on high, bring forth and nourish her young in the higher realms? None is said to be predominant in small. Sorry, guys, my teeth are like ridiculous right now. None is said to be predominant in smell. Now, it is curious fact that the most perfumes manufactured by man has a base musk, which is extracted from the dry. Oh boy. Dry testes of a musk ox. Ew. All such perfumes are both heavy and sensuous. And in early ages, especially among the Orientals, such perfumes were used only by the ladies of the harem and by courtesans. Sorry, I can't. It is strongly advised that all pupils who are earnestly striving to follow the higher life be very careful in the use of perfume. In fact, it is better not to use any, for as the soul unfolds, it develops its own perfume, just as does a flower. On the higher planes, its spiritual fragrance is quite distinguishable and is a decided factor in attracting to the advancing soul such helpers and forces as are needed, while heavier perfumes, especially those with the musk base, are strong factors in attracting a class of astral entities whose sole desire is to prolong their own miserable lives upon the delusive plane, hence strive by every means to stimulate the lower passions of mankind, that they may vicariously assimilate the life force thrown off. Also, when the great teachers, masters of wisdom, desire to approach a pupil, the pupil should have every sense alert to detect their presence. If acute, the sense of smell can be readily utilized by a master, often only a waft of the master's characteristic perfume being given as a signal to the pupils of his presence. But if the sense of smell has been sulfified or overpowered by artificial perfumes, this sense cannot be used to detect the fragrance of his presence. The masters need no perfumes to attract them. Hence, the use of any perfume on the person, such as sandalwood, to invoke their presence or invoke their aid is worse than useless. The perfume of love, aspiration, and devotion arising from a pure heart being all that is necessary. As well might a rose bush seek to attract lovers of its beautiful bloom by drenching undeveloped stalks with an artificial rose perfume. The letter Nun also expresses concentration and harmony. By some, it is associated with the home love, but to carry out the idea of esotericism, they aver that this home love is not such as seeks for outer display and recognition by the world, but perfect love and harmony within the home life. Interesting. Temperance, the 14th tarot card. Get a real good look. Over water. Pouring from 2 cups. The triangle, the wings. And again, this is a modern version of what it looks like from the wider rate deck. Quote, temperance is a bridle of gold. He who uses it rightly is more like a god than like a man. Burton. The 14th card of the tarot is called Temperance and is associated with the sign Scorpio. This card pictures a young woman with wings holding a vase in each hand. In her left hand, she holds a vase of silver, metal of the moon, from which she is pouring a clear liquid into a golden metal of the sun. Vase held lower down in her right hand. The liquid thus transferred symbolizes the water of life, the all creating bearing forth of life, the bringer of life, the life essence of creative force, which must be transferred from one vase to the other during the process of creation without a drop being spilled by the intrusion of thought of evil or by the distraction of the attention to sensation or mundane affairs. It also symbolizes that we must transfer this force from the imaginative state, moon, into the activity of the sun without loss. This is to say, while imagination or the power to create mental images is a most potent force in creation, we must see to it that the images thus created are pure and golden. We naturally find that the maiden who is performing this difficult feat has wings, symbolizing that she has taken a step higher than earth, is able to fly into higher realms in thought. In short, since this card corresponds with Scorpio, it shows that the eagle is at least born in her mind and heart. For as long as man is under the lower or deadly sting aspect of Scorpio, the transfer of life force from the silver into gold vase cannot be accomplished without spilling, losing, or perverting it. This card also symbolizes that it is only the virgin who pure mind with the capacity to soar above the earth. Sorry guys, blank page. Worldly and perverted conceptions of sex that can accomplish this task. To be laid square and firm, the mental foundation must be cemented by the use of the water of life. The will must be so developed and the imagination, silver, moon, so purified that in pouring from silver to the gold vase, the imagination shall be turned into creative energy without loss or defilement. In one of the most noted temples in long past ages, all that is symbolized in this card was expressed in a symbolic ceremony celebrated every evening at sunset. This ceremony foreshadowing, as it did, the perfect equilibrium balance between the sexes and the lifting up of the life forces into a higher manifestation was considered and most sacred. It was performed by a pure virgin priestess who had been educated in the temple and kept from all profanation. And woe to her if by any mischance or by distraction or attention, one drop of the water of life in the vase would be spilled upon the ground, for this would reverse the whole symbology. The water thus spilled on the ground would symbolize that the aspect of the water of life used only for physical procreation or poured forth on the earth to bring forth the fruits of the earth, both of which are perfectly right in their places, but not in a ceremony performed by a virgin priestess. Therefore, should such a thing happen, it would indicate that she either had or, sorry guys, I just lost my place. Gosh. All right, I'm going to pick up from both of which are perfectly right in the places, but not in a ceremony performed by a virgin priestess. Therefore, should such a thing happen, it would indicate that she either had or was destined to fall away from the pure worship, hence was no longer fitted to make propitiation to the gods for the shortcomings of the people. In this temple, the esoteric truth was understood, namely, the real creative power of thought and will, especially when emphasized through a mystical ceremony, every act of which helped to impress the thought, held and to strengthen the will. And it was the Stoic truth, supposed to be known only to the priestess, which is indicated by the water of life in the silver vase held in her left hand, which she is, as a priestess, must pour into the golden one in her right. Namely, this esoteric truth must be poured out for humanity and made esoteric only into a vase of pure gold, or thus pure minds, who were fitted to receive it. Hence, the spilling of a drop meant that the task had failed. The temple in which this ceremony was performed was as many stored structure, having in its center a high tower with battlemented parapets. Access to the several stories of its tower was obtained by a circular flight of steps with a broad ramp winding around and around on the outside. The tower formed the entire center or core of the temple, with rooms surrounding it on each story, all opening outward onto the rump. At its base, it spread out into an immense audience chamber with its altar in the very center, upon which burned a perpetual fire. The tower was surrounded by a wonderful crystal dome, which was a construction on movable axis as to be a mighty reflector in burning glass. It was so arranged that it caught the first rays of the rising sun and lasted rays of the setting sun, focused them upon an altar directly under the dome. By this powerful force, the rays of the sun in the hot climate started the fire for the morning sacrifice, the wood for which was saturated with highly inflammable substance and laid in readiness. Pause. Holy shit. What? Oh my God. Why I had to pause there. If anybody knows about the Mothers of Darkness castle in Germany and its domes and its 100 points of light, which is glass, this is exactly what it's describing. Used for evil nonetheless, but this is the freaking ceremony. What? It was so arranged that it caught the first rays of the rising sun and the last rays of the setting sun and focused them upon an altar directly under the dome, 100 points of light. By this power, focused the rays of the sun, and the hot climate started the fire for the morning sacrifice. What did they sacrifice? Sick. The wood for was saturated with highly flammable substance and laid in readiness. What? That's what they did to. That's how sick and twisted this shit is. Glad I read it in this book, because no one, yeah, we knew about the sacrificing stuff, but that on top of that is sick. Sick. The altar in the center of the audience chamber was reached by 7 stone steps or platforms entirely surrounding it, the 4th step being a broader platform on which most of the ceremonies of the temple were performed. The high priestess and the acolytes were permitted to ascend the 5th and 6th steps, but only the virgin priestess could ascend the 7th step, for it was upon this step that the mystical ceremony of transmuting the life force took place. What? The ceremony, which was performed at sunset, began by 12 maidens and 12 youths, each robed in an appropriate color symbolizing the forces of the zodiac and ranging according to the forces predominating at the time, ascending to the 4th step, and there performing the mystical sun dance. A former president with the last name of B-U-S-H had his daughter do this ceremony. Go look it up. At a certain signal, the priestess, who was dressed in a wonderful robe of translucent, glistening white, ascended to the 7th step, and there stood with the lurid light at the altar fire shining through the folds of her robe, and with the golden beams of the setting sun reflect around her head like a golden halo. Then a needling acolyte handed her the 2 vases, one in either hand. Into the silver vase, a priest dressed in full potential attire poured from a crystal vase, held high the water which had been blessed, very much as the priest of today blesses the baptismal water. And I bet you I know what was in those other vases for the dark side. Oh, in an instant, hush, and illuminated by the rays of the sinking sun, intensified by the reflecting globe, and while the vast audience was in semi-darkness, the priestess first sprinkled an obligation of water upon the flame that it might be cleansed through the fire of divine love, and then poured the water from the silver into the gold vase. The ceremony was but a symbolic outpicturing of a mystical step in attainment, which must be taken on the path to mystery by every soul. In some life, when this stage of spiritual unfoldment has been reached, this is plainly the fundamental symbology of the 14th card. No effing thank you. Nope. Again, here and again lies. They just took something that had beautiful meaning to it, you know, whether you would believe in that kind of stuff or not. But the symbology of what this card indicates is a beautiful representation of creation and thought, and mind, everything, okay? Balance. What the evil did was butcher it to the 10th degree, and now it's like spoiled, but we got to take it back. They don't get to do that. They stole all of these beautiful things. Right or wrong, good or bad, the bad really, really took that ceremony and made it like the 10th level of hell wicked. Hence why I read these books, because a lot of the truth shines through a lot of these books, because Favorite Jason mentions about the Mothers of Darkness castle and the 100 points of light and what happened with one of the president's daughters, or both of them, but not in detail because we weren't there. But then here is the actual ritual that went down that could fill in the gaps to my Favorite Jason story. And it's not a story, it's documented. This is how we're contributing to a mass awakening. I have a puzzle piece, he has a puzzle piece, you have a puzzle piece. We're all going to put those puzzle pieces together to find the truth out. And I didn't like that, but we got to really reclaim the number 13. We got to reclaim 666, which today is a 666 portal. We got to reclaim these things as for good intentions, because it was stolen and inverted, everything. So with that, I'm going to leave it there. Next time, we're going to tackle number 15. Get ready, buckle up. Sending each and every one of you love and light. I hope you all have an amazing day. Please consider helping me out. All the information will be linked down below. Hopefully I can get more in before they cut me off. So until the next time, guys. Bye.